nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hey guys, let me know if the sound is okay. I'm just going to play this little clip.
Quality window and door made buying our doors a pleasure from start to finish.
Yeah, about
It started with
quality
great products.
windows
Our
and doors.
doors are beautiful. Our salesman was knowledgeable, personal.
That's not what is supposed to happen. Guys, is the sound okay? Everything okay with the sound? I've got a couple of thumbs up. Let's see if I can just take the sound off. Everyone doing okay? Timmy says hi. Just we'll get into it in about 10 seconds. Funny, the first time I played this, the ad didn't come up. Okay, so here we go.
On the air at 4 o'clock with some new details in the DELPHI murders case. Prosecutors are now responding to a series of new court filings from the suspect's defense team.
That includes motions to allow cameras in the courtrooms and throw out evidence found in Richard Allen's home. Allen is set to go on trial in January for the deaths of Abby Williams and Libby German. Allen's attorney submitted a filing last week outlining why they believe the girls were ritualistically sacrificed by members of a religious cult called Odinism. They also accused law enforcement of covering up evidence. Carroll County prosecutors called the allegations, quote, a fanciful defense for social media to go crazy over. It's just one of the reasons prosecutors don't want cameras in the courtrooms, also citing gruesome images, a duty to protect jurors, and an allegation that cameras would be distracting.
In another filing, those prosecutors, same prosecutors we're talking about, also went on to defend a search warrant of Richard Allen's home, which the defense claimed was issued without probable cause. These prosecutors say the sheriff did not lie about evidence to get the warrant and instead used information gathered by law enforcement and statements by Richard Allen and his own wife. Prosecutors also say they believe Allen might destroy crucial evidence if that warrant was not issued.
Prosecutors are asking for all future filings to now be sealed before being released to the public. And you can read more on our website right now at WNDU.com.
Okay, so
this video of an Iowa cheer.
So that's the kind of thing I want to talk about. I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of the document for those who don't know about it. I'm sure many of you have gone through it on other true crime channels, and this is really it. State's second objection to defendant's motion to suppress. Right, so we're going to be dealing with that. Before I kind of greet you guys, I just want to know how many of you guys have seen the movie Inception? Kelly Dean, good to see you. Sharon, good to see you. Jalsias, have I made you a mod here? Not sure if I have. Zircon says I haven't seen the document. Okay, so we will definitely go through some of it. Songbird, good to see you. AM says I have seen the movie. Okay, so I'm going to play you a little clip from Inception, and it's really something to keep in your mind. Excuse the, it's kind of a pun, excuse the pun, because it's kind of touching on what we're talking about here.
What is the most resilient parasite? Bacteria? A virus? An intestinal worm?
Timmy, I think I'm going to put you down. Let's try that again. Let's try that. I think let's try a different channel. Bring this up. Why do you think I'm bringing up this idea of the power, the resilience, the danger of an idea? I'm talking about in the context of what we're talking about. We're talking about the defense has just brought out a kind of cockamamie ritual story and so then the question is, I suppose on the one hand you can say, so what? That's the defense right to do that. On the other hand, do you agree that it has stuck with some people? Some people are saying, cheapers, this is actually what happened. I think I did a poll on my channel. I think it's in double figures, the number of people who believe that this was a sort of Odin ritual thing going on, right? And so that shows you the strength of an idea, just a thought. Once you put the thought into someone's mind, it's there, it's resilient, it's more contagious than a virus, right? You guys follow the thinking pattern? Yeah, there you go. And so, exactly, brainwashing. So I know when I read the 130 something pages of the defense story and decided I'm not going to cover it. And part of the thing that I had to think about is, you're a true crime voice, you're a true crime creator, you're a true crime author, you went to Delphi. Whether you agree with the defense version or not, isn't it not your duty, but isn't it just you doing your job to cover it? And so that was kind of one aspect to what I was thinking about. But the other aspect was, well, if I don't believe it's true, if I believe it's actually so ridiculous, am I going to pretend that I don't think that and then cover it in a way? It's shocking and it's sensational. What do you guys think? And I mean, obviously, get a lot of interest and sort of go through the whole thing. Isn't that just my job, just to put the ball in your court and say, what do you think of that, right? And I did think about that for a while, and I thought that's actually not what's going on here. What's actually going on here is this has been put in the public space intentionally in order to galvanize social media, and that is exactly what happened, which is why I thought it was irresponsible to cover something so basically ridiculous. And anyway, so that's where we are now, the prosecution basically saying that sort of thing. So, 136 pages, can you believe it? So I'm going to come back to this clip. What I want to do first is deal with the document. Let's see if I can bring it up. There it is. It's not nearly as long. It's 6 pages long. I actually thought it was 8 pages, but it's 6 pages long. We're not going to dwell for too long on the document, but I just do want to highlight certain things in it. So those of you who've already heard it, please bear with me. Okay, shall we do it like that? Just not quite sure how to make it full screen. Isn't there a simple? Anyway, I think that's still okay. Okay, so this is the state's response to defendant's moment for broadcasting order, right? So it says here, now comes the state of Indiana by prosecuting attorney McClelland, respectfully responding to the defendant's motion for broadcasting order. The state would, of course, defer to the court's discretion. Anyway, let's go into point number 1. On September 13th, 2023, which is around about 14 days ago, it's about 2 weeks ago now, the defendant filed a motion for broadcasting order to allow cameras in the courtroom for all future courtroom proceedings, right? And so what do you think the relevance is of that? What do you think the relevance is of they want the cameras in the courtroom, and it's sort of right on the back, it's right within the sort of momentum of them also disclosing the thing about the what do you call it, the rituals and this whole cult thing that's going on, right? Well, isn't it so that what is going on outside the courtroom can influence the inside of the courtroom? What has gone on outside the courtroom, like right now, can come into the courtroom as well. So that there's a little bit of a exchange In other words, it feels like the defense feel they need the court of public opinion to influence what's going on in the court in some way, as a way perhaps to help them, right? It's actually quite uncommon. In my experience, often defendants and defense cases don't want cameras in the courtroom. Tends to be prosecutors don't mind or they're okay with it, but the defense tend to not really like the idea. That's just been my experience. Anyway, so Linda says it's called the Chewbacca defense. Diversion, that's it. Okay, so let's go to point number 2. The defense is asking the court to broadcast both the trial and pre-trial proceedings in their entirety. And what's quite interesting is also the pre-trial. So in other words, before you've even gotten into the trial, it's becoming fodder. It's becoming something that is, part of the, obviously going to be part of the true crime content, right? Kind of thing. And, if you think about it, how many cases have we now been dealing with back to back to back to back, where the, what do you call it? The idea of including cameras or including the media, or including the public directly in court proceedings, it's becoming a matter of concern and dispute. And what's really crazy is, although it's quite common, I mean, you've got court TV in America, although it's quite common to have televisions in the courtroom in America, and we also have them in South Africa. We had the Henry van Breda trial streamed and on camera, Oscar Pistorius, as you guys know as well. But what's quite interesting, in a country like the United Kingdom, I think they've only had televised, I'm not sure if it's sentencing or the whole trial, but they've only allowed cameras in the courtroom for just over a year. And the judge in the Lucy Letby case has actually said he's really pleased with the result, with the amount of interest and engagement from the public. So they seem to be on the sort of far end of the spectrum, where the public actually starts becoming interested in this sort of thing. And now I think where America is almost the full circle aspect to that, which is there's a dark side to that. And the dark side is, for example, Depp versus Heard, where it becomes a feeding frenzy, where it becomes a cottage industry for creators to grab little sound bites, put them on the internet, make money, laugh and jibe, and turn the trial into an inversion of itself. It's no longer the court being held inside the courtroom. It's actually being tried in the court of public opinion, which then reverses, in a way, it kind of can influence what's going on inside the courtroom. Alf, good to see you. Thanks a lot for that point. Jalsi says, definitely not in Canada. I hope you're feeling better. I know you haven't been feeling too well. I hope you are okay. Okay, so let's continue. So first, the state would ask the court to consider that previously this court has expressed concern about, and I really think that's an interesting way of putting it, extrajudicial grandstanding, right? Am I not able to highlight on this particular format? Okay, yeah. So just think about those words, and do you agree that that's taking place? Extrajudicial grandstanding. In other words, beyond the courtroom, showboating, grandstanding, making a fuss, creating a circus. And he says that is actually what led to the issuance of the gag order by the court on the court's own motion in December 2nd, 2022. So it's almost been a year. And you've got to think, why are gag orders in place, right? It's to protect the integrity of the case, of the trial, right? Gag orders are in place so that things don't leak out to the media and social media, and you have these conversations that then morph into all sorts of strange opinions and so on, that some stray from the the legal merits, and that is of concern to the legal eagles, right? Anyway, let's go on to the next page. The defense team has continued this extrajudicial grandstanding throughout their motions, including the emergency motion to modify safekeeping order. And, if you think about it, the same exact thing is taking place in the Idaho 4 case. It's this question of wanting to have, well, I think everybody wants this. Like anyone who's honest and sincere wants transparency, wants public access, wants a clear idea of what is going on, right? But that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is there are groups out there who believe or are suggesting that Coburg is innocent, and then they will manufacture or they will put together things that don't always make a lot of sense. And then that kind of creates a faux narrative. And some people kind of get caught up in the faux narrative. And I just find it really interesting and troubling, to be honest. You can look at a trial like the Murdoch trial, like the Lori Vallow trial, which I sat in on. One case and another, and what you see is you get a little window into what's happening in the media landscape through that one specific trial. I mean, the Gabby Petito case is also a really good example. It didn't even go to trial, but it became this explosion of social media. How much of that social media was helpful? Some of it was. How much of it was not helpful? Like saying, I think I've just seen Brian Laundrie, and then the FBI came out and nearly shot someone on the Appalachian Trail, right? So there is an aspect that is helpful about it, undoubtedly, but there's another aspect that definitely isn't helpful. And I think one's got to look at it in aggregate and say, in sum, is what's going on helping us get to the truth and justice, yes or no? And I think one's got to be honest about that. If you say, I honestly care about justice. I mean, I studied law for a while because I thought that was the way I could deal with that. And then I just became more and more disillusioned, kind of because of the political situation in South Africa. I just thought it's a little bit of a pipe dream to be trying to do this. But I mean, I really believe in justice and telling the truth and authenticity. But I'm also become very aware of how the odds are stacked against justice today. You have certain cases going to trial that you think ought to succeed, and then they just don't, and it's quite shocking and you see that justice is not guaranteed. That's why the Lori Vallow case is really encouraging. You see, well, that was the right verdict. Same thing with Letitia Stork. But every now and then, I mean, look at the Suzanne Morphew case. It hasn't even gone to trial, right? And so I think we've got to take a serious look at what's going on and say, why is what's going on and is what's going on helpful, and is it going to lead to justice at the end of the day? Are our efforts, certainly in the true crime community, are they helping the process along, or are we actually a disservice, which I think is an incredible thing to think about and talk about? Is the true crime community actually an incredible disservice to criminal law, to active cases that are happening, right? Okay, so let's continue here. So number 5, the broadcasting of pre-trial and trial proceedings create the same concerns, if not more, given that an attorney is immune from libel proceedings for statements made in open court. So he's basically saying, defense attorney or whatever attorney can say whatever they want in court, and that can then have another life, a second life online, in social media, in the media, and they can't be accused of libel because it's within the court situation, which means they can kind of, they can kind of throw things out there, right, and know that there's going to be people fishing for that sort of thing that are watching, right? That's kind of the concern. Thanks very much, Rolana. Okay. That's another thing that is coming up more and more is you hearing about libel, just the idea of it, defamation, libel coming up in the whole narrative. We've heard someone actually sued for libel in the Koberger case successfully, which is also incredible. That was actually quite an interesting case to look at how the person defended themselves, saying, I have the right to my own religious beliefs, or something like that. I think she was reading tarot cards, and the tarot cards were saying that someone had committed the crime, and she was saying, you can't accuse me of the right to share my religious thoughts, or something like that. So she even though she was what's the word, challenged in a legal sense, she still thought it was defensible, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, number 6, the defense continues to use inflammatory language in pleadings, including statements that are simply not true, and there's no reason to think that they will not continue to use supercilious language in court. There you have it, designed as sound bites for recording on the national stage. For example, the language used by the defense describing the conditions under which Mr. Allen has been forced to endure are akin to that of a prisoner of war, right? And so thanks a lot, guys. CBTV says some of the clairvoyants help solve the Gabby Petito case. I think you may be missing the legal mischief that's involved, where you have a clairvoyant, someone saying, what I'm trying to, the point I'm trying to make is, how can we protect the integrity of trials and cases? And I think one way you think about that is you kind of got to ask the question, how are some people managing to defeat the efforts to bring a case to trial in a fair way, where the public isn't misinformed, manipulated, where the information that they've been exposed to somehow, somewhere, there's been some kind of distortion. And so, if you play devil's advocate and you say, I'm a true crime creator, I want to make accusations and then be defended against the law, but if I make it. And the one way I suppose you could try and do that is through parody. You could parody what you're saying and say, well, it was all a joke. I wasn't really serious about what I'm saying. The other thing that you could do is you could say what this person said. I think that this person committed the crime. And then your defense is, well, it was a tarot reading. You can't hold me liable for that. You've got to, you know what I'm saying? So it's that's the kind of thing that people are having to deal with, right? What does Cleo say? Cleo says, thanks a lot, Cleo. Terry Dean, by the way, it's good to see you here as well. I've actually got that little pieces of glass from Prosser Lake. I've still got it here. From the Kylie Rodney case. Okay, so let's continue here. So what they're talking about in terms of these, look at the words inflammatory language, supercilious language, describing the conditions as prisoner of war. I think you've kind of got to ask the same thing on YouTube. The titles YouTubers give to their videos, it's a case that someone is thinking about, and then you see words like shocking, I don't know, that tends to be it. Shocking, crazy new update kind of thing. And that kind of plays into that old tabloid thing. I mean, we've been speaking about it. Okay, so let's go to the next point. The defense has filed its 136-page memorandum in support of the Franks hearing, in which only 13 pages refer to any allegations relevant to the question of a Franks inquiry. The remaining 90% of the memorandum outlines its fanciful defense for social media to devour. And isn't that exactly what happened? Like my sort of response when I heard about the defense's motion, I thought, wow, so we've heard about the allegations against Richard Allen. We've heard that he said he was there, all that kind of stuff. We heard that someone actually saw him, or someone saw someone who looked like him leaving the scene, going to where we know his car was parked, covered in mud and blood. And we know that they found similar clothing to that in his home, found a particular firearm of a particular caliber. We know that particular caliber shell was found at the scene. All of that. And then on the other side, the defense, after he's confessed numerous times, they then release this long document. And suddenly, wow, there's another story out there. And some people are, wow, this could be it. This could be what really happened. And when you sort of read between the lines, it's 136 pages. And as they say here, 90% they say outlines a fanciful defense for social media to devour. I mean, you kind of get the idea, that's the perception I got. Like when I saw this, I thought, wow, social media are going to have a field day with this. This is someone's going to be rubbing their hands and say, awesome. I need something I need the next chapter in the story. And isn't that what happened? And so you literally have the prosecution accusing the defense of creating content essentially for social media, right? For the consumption of social media. And I mean, I'm only reading this after the fact. Before the fact, I was looking at that saying, I'm not going to participate in this nonsense. This is complete nonsense. I'm not going to be part of it, right? And it's not just a thing of, you might say, well, you're a snob, or it's actually, we part of the true crime community, we want to know all these details. But you kind of, I think, have got a responsibility to say, is this likely? Is this reasonable? Is this a proper argument, or are we actually being used as a weapon to help the defense, to actually help a really evil, horrible suspect? I mean, let's just take this away for a second. Look at the two faces behind me. That's actually what this case is about, Libby and Abby. And these two faces aren't there anymore. They died 5-6 years ago in a forest, and in horrific circumstances. If you were Abby, and I think this is the ultimate test. This is the test of, is this the way to go? Is this the way to deal with this? If you were Abby, if you were Libby, would you want someone telling the story of what may have happened to you to be telling stories like this, that are absurd, that are making a mockery of the real horror of what you actually went through, turning it into a joke, turning it into, would you want that? Or would you want someone to deal with what happened to you in a serious way, in an authentic way, with integrity, right? Let's try and find the person who did this, not turn it into kind of a joke, right? Not turn it into something for social media to devour. I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying? I'm saying, if you were the victim and the defense of your murderer was putting out things that were obviously garbage, but you were the murdered person, and people were talking and laughing about it in a non-serious way, I can tell you, as someone who's personally visited a lot of these places, the feeling, it's quite hard to put this into words. I mean, probably everyone will have their own experience, but the feeling you get, besides sadness, is a kind of a sense of permanence, that this place where somebody died, or this place where this happened, still exists. It's changed, but nevertheless, that person's life, it came to a permanent end at this place. And so you feel like that's got to be treated in a sober, careful, sensitive way. And is that what's going on in true crime? And I do want to recommend to my fellow true crime creators, especially all of those who did cover this meal for social media to devour, all of those who I looked on a couple of channels and I saw one by one that each of them did do that, which I personally thought it's wrong and it's irresponsible. Spend some time in a courtroom. If you have already, go and do it again. I don't mean watch it on TV. I mean actually be in court. When I was attending the Laurie Vallow trial, there are things that are, and I mean that whole trial wasn't televised, but there are things that are not shown that happens between one moment and the next, where you see lawyers arguing whether it's in the public interest for this, that, and the next thing, and you realize just how sensitive everybody is to what is being said about a case. And so we've got a responsibility for what we want to hear and what we want to see and what we want to say. We've got to be careful about that. Do you guys agree with that? I think you're missing what I'm trying to say. There's, for example, in the Laurie Vallow case, you would have the cameras on, but it's kind of internal, so you can only see what's going on in the overflow. And then they would turn those cameras off when they're deciding, even in that very limited capacity, whether to allow the people in the overflow to see, for example, autopsy photos and things like that, whether they want to allow the camera. I think I actually asked, can we have the camera zoom in a bit closer on Laurie and also on the witness, and they actually said no. And I think the reason is they don't want every little smile and so on reported on. They want the basic, the gist of the trial to be the gist of the trial kind of thing, right? And so, but the important thing, so one thing that I remember very clearly from the Laurie Vallow case was when sensitive photos were going to be shown, how much effort inside the courtroom they went to. They didn't even want the gallery to see autopsy photos, because sometimes often you had members of the family in the gallery, and they had said, we don't, well, I assume they'd said this because they weren't there often on some days when this was covered. And so they would then cover monitors. If you were sitting in the gallery, you could see the monitors that the lawyers were looking at. They would cover the monitors or they'd turn them around, and it would take quite a lot of time to do that, all in an effort to make sure the people who got to see this evidence were the jurors and the lawyers, and that's it, right? And as you guys know, there was a incident a couple of weeks ago, I guess, where someone took autopsy pictures kind of out of context in a sense. I just mean, and people were quite unhappy about that. That's the kind of thing that can happen when you just televise. Let's just put the camera there and not be aware of the possibilities. Another thing that you may not think about, I've sat in a couple of trials, and sometimes you'll have a witness sitting down and they'll be asked who they are. They'll be asked where they live. Sometimes they'll be asked about a cell phone message or something, and then they'll give their cell phone number. And because of the intensity of the courtroom experience, nobody actually stops to say, hey, people are watching this. You're going to have millions of people or thousands of people who now know your cell phone number, who now know your home address. Once that information's out there, it's, the rabbit's out of the bag kind of thing. And there's so many things like that are actually private that you wouldn't want given away in a courtroom situation either, right? What is someone said something? I think the reason, it's a good question. I think the reason why the Vallow trial was so protected was because family members testified. And you must remember, So it wasn't like there was a lot of testimony, but for example, Laurie's son testified in court. Some of Laurie's friends testified in court. And I think they wouldn't have wanted to on camera. So I think that was kind of a part of it. I think I kind of got a sense of embarrassment almost that we used to believe this. We used to believe this person, and well, look how we were misled, and they didn't really want that to be, because you can kind of imagine almost how if you were watching this in your lounge, you might say, "Teepers, that you weren't very smart. Really, you believe that? You believe that what that person said?" And that they didn't really want to have a public flogging. They didn't want to be publicly humiliated. Okay, so let's continue with this. So that's quite a lot, saying 90% of their memorandum, basically saying 90% of that 136-page document was basically for social media fodder. And then the question is, did social media feed on it? And the answer is yes. Number 8, the defense has already moved for a change of venue, citing prejudicial publicity. And I think this is a very good point to make, a very sound point to make, which is, while the defense are worried about prejudicial publicity, right? Meanwhile, they are letting out this massive document. It didn't need to be 136 pages long. It didn't need as much detail as it did have. Right? I think you'll agree with me. It had some incredibly detailed things that we didn't know before. We weren't fully aware of, right? And suddenly, after feeling that publicity might be prejudicial, and they might want a change of venue, well, then suddenly they throw this this buffet to social media, and I think the idea was, if you can't beat them, join them, like in the sense of, if we can't get a change of venue, why don't we use social media to our own ends? Let's have social media chatter about shocking things, about rituals and cults and so on, and just think about it in a weird way. And those of you who know me will know what I'm saying when I say there's a intertextuality that goes on in many different layers and levels. And one layer and level is how one trial can influence another trial. Often I've said it in court cases where they refer to another top of mind court case where you remember something that happened in that trial, something that stood out. Deaf versus heard has been mentioned quite a lot in subsequent cases. I think it's been mentioned in the Koberger case by the judge, hasn't it? I seem to remember that. I think it was also mentioned in the Laurie Vallow case. I think the Laurie Vallow case also mentioned something somewhere about the Idaho case, although I'm not 100% sure of that. I can't be 100% on that. Just trying to think of another case where that happened. I know even Patsy Ramsey was saying the O.J. Simpson case is a sign of the American justice system showing it's like cracks in the system, something like that. She said something like that. But I'm just trying to think what was. Oh, okay. So in terms of this case, I believe it's using the recent Laurie Vallow case, which was about cults, to get those people's attention, I guess, thinking that cults are real and cults are sort of widespread. I don't think they're as real, and they're not like around every single corner. It is real, but I don't think it's. I don't think it has any bearing on this case. But there's some people who would believe that it did. Okay. So I do think that is really interesting, quite a clever legal strategy. in a sense, quite cynical, but clever from the prosecution to say, wow, 1 minute the defense was saying prejudicial publicity, and now they seem to be helping that whole process along. Do you guys agree with that? Well, Chelsea says, I don't think anyone's making that connection. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. The state believes that the duty of managing the broadcast media that is imposed on the court may become distracting, considering the number of media outlets that may request access to the broadcast. The fact that the judge is in an unfamiliar courtroom, the length and complexity of the case, the duty to protect the jurors' identities, and the sensitive content that will be presented at the trial and pre-trial hearings. Now, I've actually just seen, I didn't actually know this, but YouTube have updated their sort of advertiser guidelines, and me just saying this is probably going to get me demonetized, but anyway, let me say it anyway. I'll try and say it without actually saying it. Any video that talks about child A, you know what I mean with the word A, basically is going to get demonetized. You can talk about certain sexual crimes that have to deal with adults in a way that's not graphic, but as soon as you deal with it in a graphic way, obviously then there's a problem, but you can't deal with it at all when it comes to children, right? And so even YouTube have got very basic standards that they don't want to incentivize creators to be talking about such sensitive content. And yeah, you've got the judge being asked kind of the same thing, but in terms of the mainstream media saying this is really sensitive information, and it shouldn't be for everyone to see and think about. It is sensitive, delicate information. And again, I want to remind you who this case is really about. If you were Abby or Libby, if you were any victim of true crime, would you want your dead body shown on television or on a YouTube video? You know, would you want there to be would you want there to be sensitivity in terms of what happened to you? I personally don't think there's a lot wrong with showing something like fingernails or showing a hand or something like that. But some people, anyway, I don't really want to go into that. But the point is, I think it should be dealt with sensitively, and you can't deal with it sensitively when you're broadcasting those images as they appear. You broadcast them when they appear as they appear, because then you're relying on the integrity of your audience and the streamers and the creators. And can you rely on that? Should you rely on that? So can you see, you know, in a way we live in a very, what's the word? You know, there was a time when a certain level of nudity in movies and TV was sort of okay. Now I think there's male and female nudity and so on, right? And you might say there's nothing wrong with that. By the same token, there's been, I think we've become desensitized to various levels of violence. You see a fictionalized level of graphic violence, and you think, what is wrong with seeing real violence? And I must say, personally, I think in a courtroom, that is the place to fully see what happened. In other words, I think you can also help a criminal by what's the word? You can help a criminal by suppressing and preventing people from seeing what they've done. But I think there's a fine line between that and being exploitative, right? so I think I feel really strongly about this because I covered this, especially in the Oscar Pistorius case. At some point, when you're trying to prosecute a crime, at some point, I think you've got to look at what the criminal did, right? And that tends to be the victim. At some point, I think you've got to take a full, hard, cold look at the damage that was done. But that I think needs to be a discrete and to some extent private process, right? It's actually a very difficult one because I think there are good people out there that probably would be what's the word, where that kind of reality would help them appreciate what has happened. The problem is there are so many opportunities out there would use this in a way that, let me show you these shocking photos kind of thing, and that's all that people want to see. Yeah, in terms of what we're dealing with, we want to deal with it in context and where it actually has a point. It's not just, the point isn't just to shock and be shocked, sensation and be sensationalize something. It is to show what a perpetrator did and prosecute them. Isn't that why we're here? Right? Do you see my point? And if you take that context away, then it's I don't think it's very ethical. Number 10, the state believes that these hurdles may also have a negative impact on the participants in the proceedings and impair the dignity of the trial. You must remember, when you're trying to have a trial, and you see this, you experience this when you're in the court, you get a sense of, it's not just the gallery that's watching, it's not just the jury that's watching, it's not just the judge that's watching, it's not just the media that are there also watching and taking notes, it's not just someone who's on social media, but the fact that it's on camera means that you're sort of aware in a way that I don't know if it's very helpful. You're aware that the outside world is going to think that that's a joke and is going to use that, whatever. In other words, you're not really concentrating on the merits of the thing. You are being distracted. And I've found the opportunity to miss a crucial thing when you're sitting in a courtroom and something is being discussed. Sometimes it's the incident itself, and people will cough, chairs will move, a phone will go off. There are all these ordinary natural distractions that interfere just with the ability to get the version of events the way that the person is trying to communicate it. Now you're adding this other level of distraction. And jurors and judges and lawyers and prosecutors, everybody have got a limited amount of attention that they can pay attention to literally everything. And that sort of sucks up quite a lot of attention, where you've got to worry about what are other people thinking, what are other people saying, and then they take that and they say it in the media. Now you've got to worry about what's being said there in the media, right? Okay. So I think the dignity of the trial is quite an important thing to think about, besides the dignity of the victims. The defense has already expressed its intent to attack not only the evidence, but the credibility of those who investigated the case. Now, that's something we see so often in our lives now. If somebody accuses someone else of doing something, you don't have to respond to those allegations. Excuse me. Kind of a good example right now is Russell Brand. If someone accuses someone else of something, instead of dealing with those accusations, all you do is you discredit the person that's accusing you. And so you're kind of having that going on so much. It's kind of a default setting in defense cases to criticize the police. The Ramseys did it, the McCanns did it, Amanda Knox did it. I'm just trying to think, pretty much every case you look at. Koberger's trying to do it. Laurie Vallow, I'm just trying to think about that. Didn't really come up that much there. but yeah, it tends to be the kind of default setting. Criticize the credibility. In almost every case, the prosecutor will in some way be accused of something by the defense. Think about Depp versus Heard, how that prosecutor was humiliated, right? So in other words, you don't necessarily have to explain the merits. You just discredit, and then you basically are excused, I guess, from doing that. I'm not sure what your point is. So, like, if you say we have to have cameras, are you saying if there are no cameras, there won't be justice? Is that what you're thinking? Or are you saying, I really, really want to see this case, so there should be cameras? Or are you saying the cameras will make sure that both sides do the right thing? Is that what happened in Depp versus Heard? You must also remember that you can also blame the media. If you're on the wrong side of the verdict, you can blame the media at the end of the whole thing for if something gets broadcast that is, for example, a secret document or a statement that someone shouldn't have made, or something that was said in confidentially, but there was a live mic or something. Things like that can actually cause a mistrial. So I think you've got to look beyond. I want to hear this case on camera. To first of all, why should it be, and then second of all, how should it be? I'm trying to think of so what is quite interesting with the Laurie Vallow case was, instead of broadcasting video, they allowed audio to be recorded and then broadcast later, which I must say I think is quite a good idea, because you don't get a terrible amount through that kind of video that they were recording anyway. You don't get a terrible amount. You get a fuzzy idea. For me, ideally, certainly as someone who's written books, you want close-ups of the accused or the defendant while they are testifying to get the micro expressions and things like that. But that's exactly, I think, the narrative that some people don't want out there, because some people will say, you just remember, the whole thing, innocent until proven guilty. That kind of thing should be left until after the trial, things like that. But we're living in a media landscape where that's just quite unreasonable at the moment, where social media makes it like, what happens and it's discussed immediately. Okay, well, I'm sure it will be good quality. So I'm glad that you're open to another option there. It shows you are open-minded, so good to see that. Chelsea says judges are very strict in Canada. Okay, let's continue. So he says, this is put on display in the defense's memorandum in support of the accused motion for Frank's hearing, where the defense spends much of its time disparaging not the evidence, but the state, the investigators, and the other state actors. And I do think on paper, this document that is basically saying it's a cult and it's this and it's that and it's shocking, I'm sure that there was a ripe audience within those who took that seriously, who also thought this is a conspiracy. The police have been colluding. There's been a lot of improper conduct from the police, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, and all of that, you've also got to, some of that might be true. Some of those allegations may be true, but you've also got to look at the context where it's coming from. It's a defense attorney trying to defend a client of double murder and worse. And then they come up with that. I mean, the best way to defend your client of double murder is to say, well, actually, my client was at a movie and here's the movie stub, right, with a timestamp on it. And if you can't do that, and then they are then instead attacking what he describes as state actors with bad motives, then that's kind of a cynical way of defending your case. Is that an acceptable way of doing it? Okay, then he says, this does nothing to increase public confidence in the system. The other thing with this is, in terms of public confidence, if you're not treating, so let me take this a step back. So I wanna take this kind of a step back where we say, if I'm a YouTuber and I look at this document, the 136-page document, and I say, great, this is gonna be so interesting to talk about, and there's all of these other details, these shocking, lurid details. We can talk about that. We can talk about how you can't trust the police and this and that. Then what that then sort of elevates, it kind of elevates the person pushing this as credible, and kind of everyone else as not credible, which is exactly what the murder accused here is doing as well. You're doing exactly the same thing. You're saying, trust me, but don't trust anybody else. Trust me, don't trust the media, don't trust the police, don't trust anyone. It's a conspiracy. Someone who's involved in a cult did this kind of thing, and so what that does is it degrades public confidence. But guess what? The confidence in you lifts up. That's the kind of quid pro quo. I think it's a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous place we're in, and people are very receptive to that. It's kind of also, it's called DAVO. You know what DAVO stands for? Deny. Let's just check it out again. Stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So make the police the bad guy. Make the make the person who's accusing you the person who's actually the bad guy. And the scary thing is how effective it is. It really is very effective. So, okay, let's go back to this. Okay, I'm gonna just take a 20-second break and just play that part again about an idea that is
What is the...
And so that is why I think it's quite dangerous and quite irresponsible and quite an important thing to talk about. If you're in the true crime community, should you be just indulging certain ideas, spreading certain ideas, blowing air into certain ideas willy-nilly? If the defense comes up with something, right, do you give it your weight and your support? Because this is the reality. Thanks a lot, Martin. Thanks a lot for that. Face to the voice. Okay. I must say, since covering the Tights and Submersible, we've gained a lot more male subscribers, and I think it's quite important to have more of a balanced community, guys and girls, so that you guys influence one another. Anyway, I'm going to play this one more time just to really reinforce this idea that this is happening, and tell me if you think it is happening. And I've got to say, I struggle with that. I struggle with, for example, in the John Benet Ramsey case, you've got the intruder theory. That has been with us for 20 years. We're struggling to eradicate that. In the Madeleine McCann case, there's a story of someone who took Madeleine. We've been struggling to eradicate that idea. It really is like that. It really is very difficult to get rid of it. And guess who is? What did I write here? Now, if you take certain cases, the media is used almost like a weapon to destroy the case against somebody, right? and then for years that idea resists in kind of interrogation, if that's the word, right? Do you follow what I'm kind of getting at? And so I'm saying, don't you have some responsibility as a news reporter, as a true crime creator, to indulge certain ideas vis-a-vis other ideas, to not give your support, not give your platform not put this idea on your platform to sort of blow air into that balloon and give it agency, right? Or you just say, it's not my job to think about this. I'm going to just put it out there. I'll let you guys think about it. Should there be some responsibility to actually thinking about cases while they are taking place, right? Okay, so let's go back to this. Elise, good to see you. You are pretty late to the party. Freddie says, everyone has a right for defense, even if it is insane. Okay. Right, so now we go on to number 12. This is more sort of dealing with, what's the word? Dealing with, what's the word for the, I can't think of the word. Was it, I don't know, there's a word for how the spaces affect you. I just can't quite think of it. Anyway, given the layout of the courtroom, the state is concerned that with cameras in the courtroom, those cameras may broadcast the jurors. I think that's quite easy to mitigate. Witnesses who are minors, I think that is actually a very critical thing. And I do think it applies also to the Idaho 4 case. I think, people saying, I don't understand why the Idaho 4 case isn't televised. Well, because there are some pretty young people. They're not minors, but they're pretty young people who are going to testify. And should they have to run the gauntlet? Should they have to be put under that kind of scrutiny? And even if they should, well, no, I'm phrasing that the wrong way. Even if they are, it's something that could ruin their lives or could severely impact their lives. You could struggle with trauma from that kind of experience for the rest of your life. And we know what happened to Kaylee's boyfriend. We know what happened to him right at the beginning of all this. Okay, let's just quickly look at this. If you can recommend just one of your books, either your best or best one to start with, which one would it be? I think you might enjoy Neverest 4. Sorry to break into this. Neverest 4, I think, is pretty good. The Murder of Vincent van Gogh, I think, is pretty good. I'm not sure if you're from which country you're from. Christmas Star, I think, is also quite a good book. So check those out. Thanks for your question. Martin, you're also welcome to ask other people on here what they really liked. Kelly Dean, it's become a cash cow for some. Just speaking about the Idaho 4 case, I was quite interested to see Nancy Grace covering Koberger, basically going to his roots, I think going to Pennsylvania, and they've kind of discovered that he was in a class environment, and then they found that he was causing problems apparently with female students, and they eventually moved him to a class with no female students. And somewhere in the article that I read, that they were just saying that he really does seem like an incel type person. And I mean, that's something that this channel, we saw that very, very early on, including before Koberger was even identified, before he was even arrested, we were saying the person who committed this crime is likely an incel. So it's quite interesting that it's taken some mainstream media channels this long to actually think about who is Brian Koberger. And it's a very difficult question, actually, because a lot of us try and hide who we are. I think I did, but I mean, we still need to see what happens in the trial. Maybe there's a different version that comes out. I'm sure his family members are going to testify. We hear what they say. That is what she did. Yeah, that is what she did. Okay. Okay, so let's deal with. Okay, so witnesses who are minors, you can definitely appreciate that the some of the witnesses might be teenagers. It's been 5-6 years since Abby and Libby died, so it's kind of hard to imagine that they wouldn't be 18, 19 years old, but maybe there are some who are 17. I don't know. There might be. It's difficult to say. But then there might be, and I think the other thing, I mean, I think the crucial thing in terms of this particular trial is just think about it in a very simple way. And this is what I kind of believe happened, if these two young girls were approached under false pretenses on Snapchat or wherever it was, Instagram, right? And certain things were discussed and entertained, right? I mean, all of us were young once upon a time. All of us had a first kiss here or there. Well, I suppose it was once. You could only have one first kiss, right? But what I'm trying to say is that kind of thing we've all been through. You do want to have fun and you want to have whatever experience. And this one ended I believe this one ended in murder and in horror, right? And so, but there might be someone else who interacted with the same profile that they did, who is still alive, but perhaps doesn't want to tell the whole world what they were thinking or fantasizing about, or whatever it is. And I think that they have a right to that privacy, right? Don't they? Especially if it's a young person. All of us made mistakes when we were very young, and some of us kind of get away with them. But I mean, so a lot of it is conducted within innocence and naivete, and I mean, this story is in a way the dark side of the worst case scenario. In that, look at what happened to Abby and Libby, when they probably wanted to have a nice experience, a fun experience. I personally think that remember this happened very close to Valentine's Day. I personally think that they thought that they were going to smoke marijuana with a cool, good-looking boy. And I think that's basically what they thought was on the cards for them. Yeah, so 5-6 years from now means that, I don't know whether anyone would be younger than 18, but I suppose it's possible. Okay, anyway, let's continue. So can you see how young people in that compromised situation might not, let me put it another way. Let me put this another way. Do you think someone who's on the stand, who's being questioned about sensitive details like that, do you think they'd want to fully disclose, in the interest of justice, in the interest of telling the truth, in the interest of catching the killer? Do you think they would want to fully disclose all the details on camera with everybody else watching as well? I mean, even if they cared about Abby and Libby, it would in theory be compromising themselves, shooting themselves in the foot. right? And so in a situation where that can be protected, then they might be more forthcoming. Doesn't that make sense? Something else that I sort of feel like people either didn't know or stupidly forgot about in the Kylie Rodney case was they were saying, why did no one release video of the kids getting drunk and partying and all that kind of thing? Well, the police had that video, but nobody on that side of the fence wanted social media to get hold of it and pull it to pieces, because it is private, right? And it's kind of none of anyone else's business, especially if yeah. I don't know if you follow what I'm saying. The point is, you do need to there are privacy laws for a reason. There are laws protecting minors for a reason. Why? Because they need to be protected. And that is definitely something that is worrying me more and more in true crime, is where you're seeing minors that are fair game for, did you do this or did you do that? They're not fair game. And that's why I think the Idaho 4 case needs to be, needs to be examined in that respect. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so anyway, let's continue. The state believes that the defendant's statement that the jurisprudence in the state of Indiana will be scrutinized in a manner that is unusual and rare in Indiana courts because of the circumstances surrounding this case is unprecedented. Number 14, the defendants claim that the Community Relations Committee favored the blah, blah, blah article is false. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Cameras have never been allowed in the Carroll County Circuit Court during any proceedings, and the state has concerns about a case of this magnitude being the pilot case in which cameras are allowed to record proceedings. So I do think one alternative is you can say, you can kind of try and find a concession. So, for example, you can broadcast the audio. Another one is you can broadcast the opening arguments from both sides and the closing arguments, say, from both sides, or the sentencing, like they did in the Laurie Vallow case, right? You don't have to broadcast everything bumper to bumper. You can just broadcast the main thrust of it, kind of thing, if that's your concern. The defense notes that the size of the courtroom lends itself to many onlookers, meaning that there's plenty of room for legacy press to attend and report the activities of the court. And in fact, the press has widely, accurately, and without incident covered the pre-trial proceedings thus far without issue. So I think what, okay, so then he says there is no reason to believe that the media could not continue to report to the public the pre-trial proceedings and trial. So the feeling I get here is that the prosecution don't have a problem with the mainstream media, which I think is quite interesting. They're basically saying there've been no problems thus far with the pre-trial proceedings. We don't have any problems with reporters taking notes and reporting the way that they are. But having cameras there are a step beyond what they are comfortable with. I do think, if you're saying that if you don't have cameras in the courtroom, it's not transparent, but the media are there. It is transparent in terms of what the media are seeing, right? I think you've got to acknowledge that. The fact that cameras don't guarantee transparency, the media kind of do, right? And if you have enough media, then you can say, well, it's being reported from enough different perspectives. Okay. I know social media won't like hearing that. Then number 17, having cameras in the courtroom makes it difficult to have a separation of witnesses for any testimony that witnesses plan to give. And the state is concerned that the state is concerned that witnesses may inadvertently violate any separation of witness order due to the potential pervasiveness of media related to this case, creating issues with the admissibility or reliability of the evidence. Now, I do remember sitting in the Laurie Vallow trial, and I think there were at least 2 instances where witnesses admitted that they had spoken to journalists, had spoken to the media. And the reason why witnesses, one of the reasons why witnesses are asked not to do that is because whatever statement they give to the media that can then become used as like a separate trial narrative. In other words, instead of just the statement they gave to the police, something they said flippantly or in an ambiguous way can then get recorded in a news article, which can then counter the prosecution or defense's case. And that again is now allowing the trial to be held outside of the purview of the court. In other words, by not allowing or discouraging people from giving interviews, it means that they then keep the statements within the trial narrative and the court narrative, and that then preserves the integrity of it. Okay, does that make sense? Number 18, broadcasting the evidence out to the public allows for the potential of members of the public seeing gruesome images of the deaths of 2 little girls, while also seeing the toll that it takes on the family to see this tragedy play out in court. And that, I think, is kind of the bottom line, is that this is kind of Gannon Stalk times 2, and in a way it's kind of even worse. Because in the Gannon Stalk case, I don't think there was a sexual component to it. And so this is certainly a gruesome case and a shocking case, and that's the bread and butter of social media. But should a trial become the bread and butter of a true crime channel when it's when I'm speaking specifically about when it's dealing with 2 young girls, the girls behind me? So again, the question that really comes down to, if you were Abby or you were Libby, would you want evidence regarding your trial and your death, gruesome images, to be broadcast out to the public? If it was you, would you want that to happen? CBTV says, isn't social media the new mainstream media? It might be for you. I think if you're saying social media is now mainstream, I think that's a different thing to say. I've had people, whether it's a true crime and beyond, say, I don't watch the news anymore, right? So I guess in that sense, social media, and people say I get my news from social media. I think it depends on how you define mainstream. I'm a product of the mainstream media. I've been published in many magazines, newspapers, I've written books and so on. And I consider myself to have come from the standards of the mainstream media. Although I'm certainly not someone who loved the mainstream media. I mean, I had a horrible time with editors, and I was treated like crap as a freelancer. So I'm certainly not like cheerleading mainstream media until the end of time. But I do think mainstream media tends to be beholden to certain standards, which if they don't stick to, you can get sued. I was very aware of that as a magazine writer, especially when I was writing investigative pieces. So in terms of credibility and standards, I think there's a different answer to that question. In terms of what you spend most of your time consuming, well, then maybe it is the new mainstream media. I wouldn't ever think of it like that. I wouldn't call the media social media, because it's not. It's it just isn't. Okay, so let's continue here. Allowing the cameras in such a highly publicized and sensationalized case runs the risk of creating a circus atmosphere, both in person and online. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think the person is, the person who wrote this, what do you think they are cueing into? What do you think is resonating? What do you think is the source of this statement? What do you think they're thinking about? What's in the back of their mind when they made this point number 19? Let me read it again. Allowing the cameras in such a highly publicized and sensationalized case runs the risk of creating a circus atmosphere, both in person and online, where 15-second clips taken out of context can race around the world in seconds, giving an inaccurate impression of the actual evidence and the conduct of court proceedings. Absolutely. And so the legal fabric of Depp versus Heard is something that this court is aware of, and it's kind of like, we don't want that here. We've seen it happen, and we don't want what happened there here. And I do think if you just allow exactly what happened there, in other words, you just allow the cameras in the courtroom, you're going to have that circus atmosphere. You can't like hope for the best. It's a certainty. It's the new media landscape, right? So if you don't want a circus atmosphere, and I don't know which right-minded court person would want a circus atmosphere, unless you feel like you need to weaponize the public. Maybe you've got a celebrity client that without weaponizing the public, you're probably not going to win. Only in that sense does it make any sense. I actually saw a clip of Camille Vasquez saying, that's the Depp's attorney, saying that the trial was entertaining. She kind of said with a little bit of a smile. Is that what it should be? Should it, if you're a lawyer defending a client, should you be thinking, I hope this is entertaining? Is that yeah, I don't know what you guys think about that. The reference to 15-second clips, I think, is a reference to TikTok, and we know that Depp versus Heard was sort of referred to by a lot of people in the mainstream media as trial by TikTok, right? Okay, next point. That the allegations that the fact that the families have voluntarily taken to social media and other media outlets somehow abrogates their right to privacy is unfair. So I think the argument is made that, well, Abby and Libby's family have campaigned on social media for justice. And so if they've used social media, why can't, well, not why can't the defense, but yeah, I guess why can't the defense use social media? It's a little bit different when the case has gone to trial. I mean, there's nothing stopping Richard Allen from using social media, or his wife or family from making statements on social media during this period. The family used these outlets to help generate tips and clues so that law enforcement could arrest the person responsible. That is a far cry from having the family members on camera as they relive the worst day of their lives and see the evidence of this nature presented to the court. Now, I do want to ask you guys, I don't know if it's been a long day, because I know some other channels have already covered this. And I just want to ask you, because I haven't looked at their content, I just basically looked which channels covered this. And the question is true crime becoming tone deaf, right? Meaning when you are perhaps talking about this idea that there are sensitive interests at stake, when you're talking about trying to protect the integrity of a trial, but you've just covered in detail the 136 pages of the defense case, and now you're just kind of reading through this. Did you kind of get a sense of acknowledging and being accountable, or did you kind of get a sense that true crime has just become completely tone deaf? We'll just read this document, and when the next one comes out, we'll read that one, but we won't actually be self-aware enough to go, you know what, it's quite strange. This document is talking about the media and social media. Guess what? I'm social media. Guess what? In a case like this, I'm sensationalizing, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should do things in a different way. Do I have any responsibility to the trial? I mean, I'm campaigning for justice for Abby and Libby. Is this relevant to that? Am I relevant to that kind of thing? So, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you kind of get a sense that true crime creators are tone deaf to the criticisms of social media regarding court cases? What do you guys say? Because I think if you get the sense that they are tone deaf, that if you are in chat or you are part of their community or that kind of thing is happening, I really think you need to address that. I think you need to mention it to them and see how they respond. They might say, look, I'm just telling you what the news is. You can decide what to make of it. And that's one position. Another position could be, let's wait until the trial is over, or whatever. We'll see. Okay. Anyway, let's continue here. So he talks about the pilot programs in Indiana were conducted prior to the popularity of artificial intelligence software that allows for the creation of deep fakes that intentionally and undetectively can alter the things that are said in court, given the inaccurate impression of the actual business of the court. Now I've got to say, I feel a little bit ambivalent about that. I sort of feel two ways about that. It's the last point, and I think it, in a way, takes things too far. Maybe I'm naive. On the one hand, I sort of feel like arguing or complaining about deep fakes is almost similar to the defense document arguing about or making the case for a ritual crime, right? It just seems a little bit over the top. On the other hand, it is happening. I can't really see it happening in this case, but I think it's certainly possible. I do think that going forward, like, again, I don't really think it's a serious issue facing this case personally. That's my personal opinion. But I do think going forward, that it is going to be an issue. I think going forward, it is going to be an issue where you're going to be watching true crime news, and you're going to see someone saying something in court in a trial situation, but it's going to be a fake thing. But you've seen it with your own eyes, and it seems incredibly real and believable. And that is, again, this which is taking place.
What is the most resilient parasite? Bacteria? A virus?
Damn, this is
Intestinal worm?
the worst version. Let's try this one.
Resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate.
So that is a real problem, is that the landscape, the media landscape, is full of fool's gold. It's full of seeds, like ideas that are that are being contrived and constructed in order to manipulate you. And that is also why I think social media creators, but especially in the true crime space, kind of have a responsibility, because there's so much fakery and fluff. I mean, there's enough fake stuff in terms of criminals who give versions of events that aren't true. There's enough of that you've got to deal with. Now you've got to deal with people who deliberately manufacture and manipulate things in order to get views. We know that there was that one creator in the Idaho 4 case who manipulated screams, right, for shock value, right? There's really enough false information out there that you really don't want to exaggerate and do all that. And that's why my attitude in true crime is that if you just tell the story like it is, that is sufficient. And not only that, it is really, really valuable. And the way to approach true crime is to let the evidence guide you. You don't decide, you don't project, you don't put yourself in the thing. You try and remain curious and let the evidence guide you. And that is then going to take you where we all need to go. And you're also going to find out what kind of world we live in, and what kind of person manifested out of this particular entropy, or out of this situation, out of the other, right? What kind of psychology came out of the real world? And all of that is very useful to know. It's a way that we can not make the same mistakes. If you truly know the Gabby Petito story, when you travel on your trip, you can make sure you don't make the same mistakes. You can make sure you've got enough money. You can make sure your travel companion respects the fact that you've got to work, and whatever it is, right? And so you guys follow what I'm saying? We kind of have a responsibility for the ideas that we spread, especially if you've got a fairly large following, because it can take hold and it can be hard to eradicate. Okay, so I think that is the end of the statement. That's the end of that. I do want to just come back to what I said earlier, where I was saying I was in America in April and May and early June this year, and I went to the Moselle property. I was in front of Richard Allen's house. I was at the Manon High Bridge. I actually walked through the river, which I'm sure Abby and Libby did as well, and the main suspect. And you get a very profound sense of permanence. I said this earlier, permanence and sober and somber gravitas, right? I drove by the 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. I was there in the middle of the night, driving by, walking by, just standing there. And that remains, that structure remains there, whether you're there or not. And there are people that move around it and are touched by it in some way. And, it's easy to be on this side of the world, this side of the screen, where you're talking about these stories, where you are consuming and being interested in these things and thinking, well, when I press stop on this video I'm watching, when I go on to the next story, well, then that story that I've been interested in stops. No, it doesn't stop. Whatever has happened there is permanent and has permanent impacts. And whatever happened to Abby and Libby was permanent and had permanent impacts. And so 5 or 6 years later, as a result of something like amnesia or whatever our motives are, turn these sober circumstances into a circus just is not It's not done. It's not what we should be doing. Martin, what does he say? So on that particular point, like where you say, just deliver the facts, just tell me what the facts are. You know, like, so if I said, okay, well, the defense have come out with this, and these are the facts, and I read that entire 136-page document. But while I'm reading it, I don't actually think it is factual, because it's the defense's case. Whenever you've got a court case, it's one side presenting a particular perspective, a particular belief based on evidence, right? But it's nevertheless a version of reality compared to another version of reality, right? And so my question to you is, if you respect me, and as a creator, author, someone in the true crime space, if I personally don't believe something is true, I don't mean I'm 49%, 51%. I'm like convinced that it's crazy. It's definitely not true for a bunch of reasons. If that's my opinion, should I then still put it on my YouTube and kind of pretend that I think it is true? Should I kind of put the ball in your court and be like, hey guys, I don't know what to think about it. I'm not sure if it's true. What do you guys think? Is that integrity, or is that being a little bit mischievous? How do you feel about that? Would you prefer somebody did that? Or would you prefer someone said, I don't think that is sensible, that version. I don't think that thing that is being presented is reasonable or logical. Or would you prefer someone to sort of, I don't know, like what's your response to that? So the word you heard in that news broadcast at the beginning was, the prosecution called the defense's statement a fanciful defense for social media to go crazy over. That's not like a statement saying, you know what, we think that the defense manufactured this for the benefit of social media. They didn't like give it that low level of kind of tabloid sensationalism. You know what I mean? They didn't just say, we think that this was done for social media. Look at those words. A fanciful defense, that's what I thought it was, for social media, not the media. I mean, how much of the media really dealt with the Odin thing, the ritual thing? So, to be honest, some did, I think. But who really went crazy over it? Who really kind of said, let's take this seriously? And how many of you went crazy over it as well? How many of you actually believe that is true? To me, I want you to look at the screen. Okay, it's 5:45 in the morning. Yeah, the birds are chirping. Was there something else I wanted to share with you guys? So yeah, I just want to share a little bit of these images I've got here. I didn't take that photo, although I did take photos similar to that. That's in front of the in front of Richard Allen's home. Wow, Martin, thanks. I think it's your third super chat. Do you have good reasons backed by evidence to think something is or isn't true? I think it's fine. Okay. The next one is this one's just from a slightly different angle. I don't know if you guys remember when we were covering this, we were just looking at how close to that Manon High Bridge area his home was. And it was really interesting when I was in Delphi. driving literally from his home to the bridge, and there's a shorter route which I thought he took, and a longer route which I ended up taking, because you can't drive the shorter route even if you want to, which in itself was quite interesting. So what do you guys think? Do you think Richard Allen's defense is going to work? Remember, if it works with one person, and I do think it has worked with, I actually need to go and look at my poll. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Do you guys, if it works with one juror, then he essentially wins, right? Let's just have a look at the poll. We are now at 13% believe that Richard Allen is innocent. 13% believe that he's innocent. Now, if True Crime Creators didn't cover that, I'm just saying, hypothetically, if True Crime Creators had a similar response to mine and said, you know what, I really don't think that that is likely, do you think that number would still be 13%? Do you still think that number would be 13%? Let me say that again. If True Crime Creators saw this defense document, and I'm saying on their own independently, they looked at it and they thought, you know what, I know this case quite well, and this just doesn't jibe with me. I just don't think it's likely. And they said, well, I'm not going to put something out there that's this unlikely. Do you think the number of people believing in it, or what's the word, believing that Richard Allen is innocent would be 13%? Let me also ask you this question. Do you think 13% is a low number? Do you think 13% is a low number? I'm talking about the poll that I put on my channel, this poll. Right? I think it's quite a high number. I think it's quite a high number. I would even think 5% is quite a high number. 13% is a very high number to be believing in this sort of thing. So Holly says most true crime creators are denying the Odinist angle, but only after they've presented it, right? So they present the whole thing, and then, as I say, what happens is this. What happens then is this.
Just fully formed, fully understood.
So now what you've done is you've somehow contaminated a certain percentage of the true crime community with an idea that you don't even believe in. Is that responsible? Was that a good thing to do? I'm talking about if you believe in true justice for Abby and Libby. Do you really want to be presenting a defense case that you don't agree with and that seems ridiculous? Oh, no. I'm just letting you know what the defense is saying. Well, now you've got 13% of people thinking that it could be true. Well done. Well done. Good work. Well, if one person on the jury somehow is contaminated with that idea, well done. You've just effed up the trial. Well done. Well done. You've effed up the trial, and you know that's literally the situation. Okay, so let's have a look at the poll in terms of this case. Let's see if we can find it. I can't actually see it where I am right now. Let's just have a look. Okay, so let's see. 48% say it has become a circus, so almost half of you. 4% say I just want to be entertained. 34% say freedom of speech. That's also quite a large number. A third of you feel that it's just freedom of speech. And then 14% say, whatever do you mean? It's quite interesting. Martin says, your opinion is valuable given your experience. Okay, well, Martin, every time you give a $10 chat, I'm definitely not going to object, so I really appreciate it. Okay, so I just thought that not only is the prosecution's opinion on cameras, I think it's very relevant to where we are right now in true crime. With the Koberger case, I personally don't think that they should have cameras at all in the Koberger case, for quite a simple reason, because they are young. It's a young person's case. The victims are all young people. Their siblings are young. The most important witnesses in that case are young as well. And I'm saying that as a true crime creator, I know that that's not going to be good for my work, but that's how much I believe in justice. That's how I care about the right thing happening in that case. It's not like the right thing happening that suits me. No, it's the right thing happening in that case. What is right for that case? What is right for the legal process to go where it needs to go? Not what is going to work for me within that argument, if that makes sense. Yeah, they are not underage, but they are young, and I do think that's got to be something that you include in your calculus, that aspect as well. So yeah, there are parents who want cameras in the courtroom. I personally think that they're entitled to their opinion, but I mean, some of the victims' parents in this case have been involved in every documentary and are very much in the media conversation, but some aren't. And so I think you've got to look at it in its totality. If all of the parents felt that way, and the two witnesses weren't or were happy to tell their stories, and there wasn't this thing going on in Moscow where the university felt this dark cloud hanging over them. And I've been to Moscow. I've really experienced the sensitivity there. Something I haven't told you guys yet is at one point I was walking up the road. I'd gone there 3-4 times. And at one point I was walking up the road with my cell phone in my hand. And I wanted to take a photo of the house through a sort of a corridor parallel to King Road. And as I turned on, I was walking. As I turned to walk up the road, someone came up, was driving up the road, seemed to be coming back from a long weekend or something, in quite a big truck. And he was looking at me, and the feeling I kind of got was, I know this neighborhood, and I've never seen you before. And you look a little bit older than the people who live here. Like, what are you doing? And you kind of got the idea that he instantly thought I was a kind of scavenging for photos. And in a way, he was right. I was there to get a photo of the house. And I felt so actually embarrassed. I felt so uncomfortable because this is where he lives. And I had a similar experience by the Ramsey home. I was at the Ramsey home taking photos bear in mind, I've written so many books about it. It's very hard not to be really interested in what you're seeing. And I wanted to kind of go down the side of the exterior of the Ramsey home and get a particular angle. And there was a lady watering her garden then. I wanted to just to say to her, would you mind if I, and the next thing, she stopped watering her garden, went into her home, closed the door. And yeah, and I thought, well, if she comes out again, I'm gonna ask her. And then I thought, actually, I don't. If you did ask her, I'm pretty sure she would say, yes, I do mind, because I live here, right? And then I guess I would say, but don't you want to know what really happened? And I don't know how that conversation would go from there. But the point is, it is a sensitive thing, and one's got to try and balance all those interests, and that's what the judge in the Koberger case has got to do: balance everyone's interests, the interests of the victims, even the interests of the accused, the interests of lawyers on both sides, the public interest, everybody's interests. Alison says, I think they have much more evidence against Koberger than this case. I'm not sure if it's that clear. I'm not sure if it's that clear. I think it's the evidence is kind of different. I'm not sure how much. I know there's quite a lot of digital evidence in the Koberger case, but I was actually surprised how much digital evidence was in this case. Okay, so I think that is going to be it for me. Thanks everyone for being here. Mods, is Terry Dean still here? Thanks a lot for being here. Mods and members, good to have you here. Also good to see Gayla Lucas. She says, cases and people are entertaining by nature and we like to view them, but it doesn't mean we should. I think it's important to ask ourselves often in terms of true crime, do I just want to be entertained? Do you remember what the gladiator said when he was in that situation? He says, are you not entertained? And the people were being entertained, but remember what is actually going on. People's lives are being lost. And again, the way to test the appropriate way to be dealing with this is put yourself in the shoes of the victim. I mean, literally, if you had lost your life, if you were a child, how would you want this to be dealt with? And you don't even have to do that. You can think about somebody close to you that you've lost, and how would you want what has happened to them to be treated on social media? A friend of mine, still is really painful to think about and to remember and to talk about, but a friend of mine died in a very horrible accident where he was riding a mountain bike and run over. And his family said very early on, please don't speak to the press. Please don't say anything on social media. And I kind of I feel like he needs to be, a tribute needs to be paid to him, which eventually was. But the thing to think about wasn't what I want, but his family having privacy so that they could grieve, his family having a little bit of space to themselves, right? And so I think one's got to try and remember to think about it in that way, right, with integrity. Okay, so I think that's it. We've managed to do all this within 2 hours, which I think is not bad. Thanks a lot, Elise. I might be seeing you in California if you're still around, Elise. So, by the way, I'm going to be returning to America in a short while, and so if you want to follow my journey, just follow me on Instagram. If you want to visit me or want to be part of my, I don't know if you want to be part of where I'm going, I'll try and share my itinerary with you guys a little bit closer to the time. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to see everyone, but if you're on the way, I mean, Elise is one person that I actually met in California. We actually had quite a nice Korean lunch, I think we did. It really is nice meeting some of my subscribers. You become real people to me, and I think I become a little bit more real to you. And yeah, the whole conversation just reaches another level of depth, which I think is quite good and quite important. Alison says my dog is really precious. Thanks very much. Okay, guys, good night, sleep tight, and I'll see you guys next time. I just need to bring out a closing video. Let's see if I can do this properly. I'm quite sure what I'm missing. Where are my downloads? I'm trying to end off the way I really want to end off, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen. So let's see what we can do. Timmy, I'm going to put you down. I've got to see if we can end on the proper note. I'm a little bit rusty with regard to my my lives, as you guys can see. Thanks a lot, Gayla. Thanks very much. I'm going to just try and end off with a video, like a little short video that sort of does the true crime thing. You'll know what I mean when you see it. I think this is it. This one, okay. Okay, guys, very good seeing you. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time. We're going to end off. We're going to end off looking at that. Again, thanks a lot to the mods. Thank you for all your super chats. And yeah, have a good rest of your week. See you guys next time.